Here he is, our Canucks reporter, one half of the Rink-Wide duo with Andrew Wadden, and you may have seen they have a new logo there at Rink-Wide Podcast. It is Mr. Jeff Paterson on the Tuesday after Labor Day. Jeff, very exciting. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm good. I was out at the hockey rink today, so that's a good day in my world. And, hey, have to say before we get going, sat on the back patio yesterday and listened to the Brandon Sutter interview. I've always liked Brandon Sutter and have liked my dealings with Brandon Sutter, and I thought it was a great get ahead of hockey season and all that he's going through, and he was open with you guys, and interesting to hear that a couple of teams had made inquiries about his health and well-being, and so maybe there is some hockey left in him, and also his response to your question about Tanev and Markstrom and Toffoli walking out the door was quite telling as well.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, and thank you to everybody who spent part of their Labor Day listening to that, and certainly, it works at any time. You can go back and listen to that at any point this week, and thank you, Jeff, for being available for that emergency Twitter Spaces cast we did Friday, which got into the podcast. We were able to tack it onto the existing show, but it was all hands on deck on Friday, so thank you to everyone who participated. Listeners especially taking part of their Friday afternoon going into the long weekend. And spending it with us. Okay, well, let's start with a poll question and go from there. Miller, he'll now be their highest paid player at $8 million per, starting next year, of course. Is he their best player, Jeff?
With all due respect to JT Miller, I think the hope is that he's not their best player, that Elias Pettersson continues to take the strides necessary. I think you can make a strong argument, given the position he plays, that Quinn Hughes has to be one of, if not their best players, and if not Quinn Hughes, then the guy at the back there with all the equipment on, they're going to need stellar goaltending from Thatcher Demko as well. So, look, I get where JT Miller falls in the discussion, but I just think as time marches on here, you want to get a bunch of good years out of him at the front end of this new contract, but the hope would be that others perhaps pass him by and really take over this hockey club to sort of fuel it to take that next step or two that's going to be required.
The other thing that was very noticeable from JT Miller today is his optimism and sincere happiness to be in the market, but also with this team. And you might say, oh, that's easy for him to say. He just signed a big money. He signed there's a lot of money there. $56 million is a lot of money. But I would guess if he was in a UFA this summer, he would have done probably equally as good, if not better, coming off a 99-point season. To me, it's a fair deal in that vacuum at the very least. But he really believes it. I mean, that's what I took away, that he truly believes this is a good team and that what they saw under Bruce Boudreau is the real deal, that they can replicate that over 82 games.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Blake. That was sort of my takeaway, too, that an earnest commitment to not just the city and this country as an American who could have had choices, but so much of it was this group, the foundation that he believes that they have laid, and that, yes, what they did under Bruce Boudreau was not a mirage. And in fact, he thinks that guys like Pettersson and Hughes and Brock Besser are capable of getting better, and that there's more to come and more to give for this group. And so there was a genuine excitement in his voice about what's possible. And I do think that, look, we all followed it closely. Those first 25 games, it was dark. It was. And change had to come. And one of the things Bruce Boudreau did was bring positivity, and that translated onto the ice. And I think it allowed some guys that were questioning themselves and their roles and kind of where they fit in all of this. Brock Besser obviously had some other things going on in his life too, but early on he got the Bruce bump, and so did some of them. Took a little longer for a guy like Elias Pettersson, but all those players are back. All those players are back. The power play is back intact. Like, there's no reason that the Vancouver Canucks shouldn't be able to have an elite power play, that these guys should be able to put up offensive numbers, and with Thatcher Demko at the back, they're going to get goaltending. The question remains, what's in the middle? And when I say in the middle, I mean the defense between the forwards and the goaltender, not up the middle for the Vancouver Canucks, because they look pretty damn solid there. But how far can this defense help this hockey club? Can it hold its own? And can the forward group? They bolstered the forward group. They've spent money on this forward group. Miller talked about a five-man unit helping out the defense core, and I think there is something to that. And he talked about knowing that he needs to be better defensively. And Patrick Allvin talked this morning about less might be more for JT Miller, that they want to reduce his workload just a little bit, and they don't want him bumping up against 24 minutes a night, that, if they can rein him in a little bit, that maybe they can get more out of Miller, not just now, but in the long term.
What do you think this means for the pressure on Boudreau himself to replicate this success? Because the organization is saying this is a team ready to win. Their actions are telling us that.
Yeah, although in the same breath, Patrick Allvin did say, this is not a cup contender. I mean, his words were, you don't go from missing the playoffs to being a cup contender. So he recognizes that there are still some steps here. But yeah, look, there's pressure. They're in a market like this one, the money that they're spending and the personnel that they've got, plus the fact that it's just been such a dark decade for the Vancouver Canucks. And Miller made reference to that one of the things that he hasn't done is play a home playoff game at Rogers Arena, that his only trip to the playoffs, and really it's the case for most of these guys, was in the bubble in Edmonton. And he wants to change that, and he wants to change that now. And look, we know that Bruce Boudreau believes in himself and his systems, and even if they were questioned by upper management, I'm kind of curious to see how that tug of war works out, because when push comes to shove, I kind of think Bruce is going to do things for the most part Bruce's way. Maybe there'll be some tweaks along the way, but proof of concept is there that he came in, he was able to push these guys. I think they like playing for him, the coach. I think they like Bruce, the person. But yeah, I mean, there's always pressure, and especially for a guy that I don't want to use lame duck, but he's without a contract beyond this year, so if he wants to remain and work with this group moving forward, then certainly there is pressure on Bruce Boudreau to perform his job, but also to get the guys under him to do their jobs.
Yeah, he is a lame duck. It's that simple until he gets an extension. I loved what Miller said about being more of a 200-foot player. I do wonder whether last year and the added defensive responsibility and penalty killing, we talked about how he was the only Canucks forward over 2 minutes per game in shorthanded time. I do wonder whether that affected his perspective in terms of the type of player he has to be. And I loved, the guys he name-checked and his commitment on that side of things. Was there something from Allvin beyond you don't go from a cup contender or from a non-playoff team to a cup contender that stood out to you? Was it his name-checking the core and missing Brock Besser or excluding Brock Besser when talking about who represents the Canucks score? Because he even threw the question back at the media and then went about detailing it himself.
Yeah, I mean, and that's going to be discussed, obviously, in a market like this one. At the same time, how many guys can you name? How many, realistically, how many is the core? So I don't know if Brock Besser will take offense to not being included there, but yeah, I mean, it was noteworthy, certainly. I was glad that he included JT Miller after signing. Wouldn't that have been something? He rolled off a bunch of names, and Miller wasn't part of that. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. One of his last answers, he was quick to praise ownership for signing off on the JT Miller deal, and we always wonder about ownership's role in all of this. And ownership wasn't presented in the question, and Allvin took it and gave praise to the ownership group. So I thought that was interesting. I guess one of the things that really stuck out for me, he said that as a front office, they had all sorts of discussions, and when they projected out to who was going to be available on the free agent market next year and the year beyond that they kept coming back to this determination that there just was nobody that was better than the guy that they already had in JT Miller, and that was a big part of the decision that was made here. He also mentioned Bo Horvat. He was asked a number of questions about Horvat. In fact, I was quite surprised from my media brethren how quickly the conversation moved off JT Miller and on to Bo Horvat. It circled back to Miller at the end, but lots of questions about Bo Horvat. And, of course, Allvin said that they really didn't have to do a lot in the way of cap gymnastics this year for an extension for Horvat because it wouldn't kick in until a year from now. But he recognized that any decision with Bo Horvat is going to come with significant cap implications moving forward. But he did say that the two sides are talking. He wouldn't say that he was hopeful that something could get done before the start of the regular season. And then he referenced the Miller deal and just said, things can change in a hurry with one phone call. So, it certainly didn't sound like there were sticking points or friction with Horvat right now, but in the same breath, it didn't sound from the GM like anything was imminent in the way of an extension for the captain.
Would you be surprised, Jeff, if a year from now, Besser, Horvat, and Miller are all reporting to camp? For cap reasons and balance of team, does one of that group need to be moved on at some point, or can they get away with expiring contracts and maybe trading away lesser likes like a Connor Garland or somebody like that.
Yeah, I mean, Garland, I suppose, is a possibility. We've talked at length on this show, and other shows have talked about, Tyler Myers has 2 years left, but by this time next year, there will be 1 year, but very little money. Like that might be a tradable contract to get out in some cap flexibility, but somebody's got to play that position, and it's not like they've got guys waiting in the wings when you think of the amount of attention that's been given to the right side of the defense in this market. So, I think there probably are ways that those three that you mentioned can come back. So much of it's going to depend on Brock Besser and the kind of season that he has and, ultimately what kind of contributions he can make. But let's be honest here. If Andrei Kuzmenko has any sort of season, I think it might be difficult to retain him. And so, yes, he's a Vancouver Canuck, but in the same breath, I think, he's sort of auditioning for all of the other teams around the
Extended
NHL as well.
PTO.
A little bit, just because, there isn't enough to go around without the cap going up considerably, and that's not going to happen next summer. And so I think Alvin and management recognize that. So somebody is from this group, from this year's team, won't be around at this time next year, and that's just the nature of professional sports and the fact that change is one of the real constants through all of this.
Well, there's plenty to discuss here, and we will over the course of the week and the course of this new hockey season, but I know you and Andrew are set to record another Rink-Wide episode today. Jeff, you got a new logo there for Rink-Wide. It looks smashing, so why don't you just give us an update on where you guys are at.
Well, I take no credit for the artwork, and nobody would want me. It would have been a stick figure, and that's about the extent of my art skills. So I leave that to the professionals, but it looks good, and it's always fun to just kind of up the game in that regard. So was happy to sort of work through that these last couple of weeks, and it's fun to get it out there. And this is now officially season 2 for Rink-Wide. In this current format. So we will launch and a couple shows per week here up until the preseason. And then once the preseason starts, we're in it knee-deep, daily shows and post-game shows and all the things that we did last year and a couple little surprises up our sleeve as well that will roll out over the coming weeks. But as I said right off the top, it was fun to be back around the rink. There were some guys skating. Tyler Myers was part of the group. Nils Höglander back in town. And I just think, on a daily basis here, we'll probably see some names added to that as the big boys work their way closer to training camp.
Marvelous stuff, Jeff. Thank you for this. Catch up tomorrow.
All right, guys. Thank you.